I don't know what they'll find of the body after the fire. Maybe enough to know that what I'm writing here is true, though somehow I doubt that. If it was that easy to discover, if there weren't people or forces working to keep it a secret, wouldn't people already know about something like this? No. My best guess is that the body will be burned up, melted, or mysteriously gone. Maybe that last is the best. I doubt they'll charge me with murder if there's no sign of where Joey went. Following that line of logic, I shouldn't be writing any of this down, should I? Just gonna incriminate myself further. But it doesn't matter. I can't not tell what happened because of some hypothetical fear of being locked up. Besides, I have a feeling little will be said about any of it. It'll either be forgotten and I'll be left alone, or someone will track me down and, well, maybe I'm paranoid. But I don't plan on using my own name or cards for a while. I don't know who I can trust, so I won't trust anyone but myself. And I need to tell what's happened the last few days. Until last night, I worked at Radstock Distribution Center at the edge of town of Jessica's Resolve. The distribution center was really just a big warehouse, though it was laid out differently than any I'd ever been in before. The building had once been a massive woolen mill, and years after that shut down, someone had tried to convert it into either apartments or offices, which I was never sure. The main floor was 2 stories high and largely open, but there were 2 floors above and 2 below that were full of smaller rooms in various states of renovation. The conversion project had apparently run out of money halfway through, so there were places that had partial walls or exposed electricals, and other areas that were completely finished and even partially furnished, maybe as models for whatever these smaller chambers were meant to be. Whatever the case, the whole place had been turned into a distribution center in the late 90s, and at one time, it had supposedly been quite busy as a third-party hub for various smaller companies that needed to ship and store goods but weren't big enough to have their own warehouses across the country. Since I'd started working there 5 years earlier, things had not been so exciting. Most weeks, we only got a couple of trucks dropping off or picking up something, and it was hard to see how the place was making enough money to be worth keeping open at all. Me and my partner Joey would sometimes joke that the warehouse must be owned by some giant company that had forgotten we exist, and so long as we kept getting paid, that was fine by us. Our job, aside from processing the few shipments that did come and go, was mainly just making sure nothing got damaged or stolen. We usually worked the 12-hour evening shift from 6 to 6, 5 days a week, and every night we'd swap off as to who had to do the check. Doing the check meant going over the main floor, but also the other 4, checking every window and door, making sure that there were no leaks, no sign of faulty electric or other problems. We'd never had anyone try to break in during the 5 years I'd been there, but in theory, we were looking for any signs of that too. I guess we could have checked more often than once a night, but there wasn't much point. So long as the merchandise wasn't missing or damaged, we were good. And to be fair, doing the check took over an hour if it was done right. We could have split it up every night, but honestly, it was just simpler to swap off. Less interruption of whatever else we were doing. Watching Joey's little TV, playing games, reading, or just waiting for the night to be over. I've had people ask me before if the old woolen mill is creepy, and don't I get skittish walking around it by myself in the middle of the night? I always give them the same answer. It was creepy at first, yeah. It's big and old and weird after all, but it's just like anything else. You get used to it, and after a while, you don't think much about it at all. It's just a building, just a job, nothing to get that worked up about. That's why, when Joey came back from doing the check 3 nights ago and he looked freaked out, I immediately sat up and asked what was wrong. Joe didn't get freaked out. He'd been there longer than I had, and the only time I've seen him even slightly on edge was the time we found a water moccasin trying to build a nest in the back of some boxes on the main floor. But this wasn't on edge. He was breathing heavy, with wide eyes and a quick, rigid gait as he came back into the admin office and shut the door. It didn't escape my notice that he thumbed the knob's lock before turning around. "Joey, what's up, man? You see a snake or something?" He looked confused for a moment, and then shook his head slowly. No, nothing like that. Puffing out a breath, he walked over to the closest chair and sat down. You know that door on the bottom level?" I raised an eyebrow at him. "Which one? There's like 8 or 9 doors down there." Even as I said the words, I realized I was just buying time. A part of me had already known the door he meant, and the thought of it made my stomach sink. You know, the one we don't have a key for, at the end." I nodded. Yeah, sure. What about it?" My sense of dread was only growing. The door had always been a weird thing. Everywhere else was either unlocked, unlockable, or we had a key. But that door had always just been locked and closed off from us. We were told not to bother trying to get in, and that it wasn't part of our job. Joey wiped a sheen of sweat off his forehead and gave a small laugh. I know this sounds crazy, but I think the door's moved." I stared at him for a moment, and then said, "Yeah, I'm sure it did. It sounds like you got started early tonight." I tried to keep the note of disapproval out of my voice, but I still heard it there. Joey liked to nip from his flask the last half of the night, but it was rare that he ever got more than a little tipsy, and never before midnight. If he was starting to drink before the check, that might become a problem. He grimaced at me. "I haven't had a drop, I swear. Look, you know where the door is. It's on the other side of the back wall down there. Nothing but bare cinder block on the left side, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's right." "Okay, well, just now when I went down to do my walkthrough, it was in that same spot, right?" "Sure." Joey shook his head. "No, just listen. I was done checking down there. I was about to head back up, and then I heard a noise. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't like a normal noise for this place. It sounded a bit muffled and far away, but it still sounded like it was coming from down there where I was at, back towards the wall and that door. So I went to look, and that's when I saw it. The door was on the left side of the wall now." I felt a stir of nervous irritation that crawled out of my belly and settled onto my chest. "Look, man, is this some kind of joke or prank or something? 'Cause I'm really not feeling it." No, it's not. I promise." His voice had been rising, and he caught himself, taking a breath before continuing on. "It's not. I'm telling you the truth. The door had swapped to the other side of the wall. I wasn't confused on which door and wall I was looking at either. It's the only one like that down there." Shrugging, I nodded. "I mean, that's true. But that's not possible, right? Maybe you just freaked yourself out, alright? It happens to everybody. Or it was a trick of the light. It's so dark down there. It's hard to tell what's what sometimes." Joey glared at me. "I'm not an idiot, and I'm not scared of this place." He paused and added, "Or I wasn't, at least." Seeing he was serious, I tried to pump the brakes and not sound so jokey or sarcastic. I didn't believe what he was saying, of course, but me acting like an ass was just pissing him off without getting closer to an answer. Taking a sip of my coffee, I nodded. "Okay, so I believe you. Did you go up to the door? Did you try the knob to see if it was still locked?" Joey's cheeks reddened. "No, I was too spooked. Once I made sure I wasn't just confused or looking at it wrong, I came straight back here." "Okay, well, I don't blame you. I can go check it out if you want me to, but..." "No, just leave it alone. We can always check it out tomorrow night. Maybe it'll be back to normal then." To my surprise, relief flooded through me. What was wrong with me? Was I really so easily scared? There was no way what he was saying was true. Doors didn't move like that. So he was either drunk, mistaken, or he really was messing with me. Still, I couldn't help but breathe easier now that I knew he didn't want me to go back down there. I gave him a smile. "Sure. Tomorrow. Sounds like a plan." I was on edge for a couple hours after that, but by the end of the night, Joey seemed to have calmed down some, and that helped me feel better too. Maybe he'd realized his joke wasn't funny, or reconsidered that he could have made a mistake down in the dark. I didn't want to embarrass him, so I just let it drop unless he brought it up again. When he didn't, I put it out of my mind, went home, and it wasn't until I was parking the next afternoon that I thought of it again, and felt that nervous feeling slowly waking up for the night. Trying to ignore it, I went inside. Normally, we do our nightly check around 10, but that night, I decided to go ahead about 7. We hadn't talked about the door moving so far that night, and I kept telling myself that Joey was over it, but I still wanted to go ahead and do the check early in the evening, if for no other reason than to get rid of the dread I was feeling. The urge to go downstairs first was strong, but that's not how we ever did it. It was always from the top to the bottom, not the other way around. And if I change the routine now, it may prompt Joey to start up again about the door, if only to see if he could spook me. So I went through the top 2 floors, mostly empty, except for a few bits of extra furniture and boxes of paper. I found myself moving quicker than usual through the finished areas. They'd always been the most unnerving part of the entire building. Fully furnished rooms that looked like they'd been ripped from somewhere else, somewhere more normal, left to slowly decay here, like hunks of meat digesting in the belly of some... No, I had to stop that shit. Get my head straight and get the check done. Go through the main floor, check the basement levels, look at the stupid wall so I could tell Joey everything was okay. Then I could finally relax. The main floor and first floor of the basement were fine, but when I got to the bottom level, I departed from my normal route and headed straight for the back wall. Better to get it over with, and... shit. Joey was telling the truth. The door was on the wrong side. Heart pounding, I racked my brain for some logical explanation. Was it turned around? No, like we said, this was the only wall and door like this down there. Could someone have come and moved the door over somehow during the day shift? But that didn't make any sense, and I wasn't sure it was even possible in a day's time. Besides, the wall and the door all look the same, faded and dirty with disuse. It was just on the wrong side of the wall now. Rubbing my face, I tried to decide what to do. I could just leave now and go tell Joey he was right, but what did that solve, really? I wasn't ready to quit an easy job just because of some freaky door that could have a logical explanation. So maybe I should just try to find the number for the daytime manager and ask if they knew what was going on with the door. That was more appealing. It might give me a simple answer that made sense. Still, I didn't want to deal with management if it could be helped. And wouldn't they have told us if they, or whatever parent company actually owned the warehouse, were making changes to one of the levels? Most likely. Unless they were doing something shady. Assuming it was physically possible to move a door like that in a span of a day, and make it look like it hadn't been moved or had parts replaced, it was also possible they were doing something they didn't want people knowing about. It sounded far-fetched, but would this be the first place that was some sort of weird front for dealing in drugs or guns or whatever? I didn't think so. Swallowing, I forced myself to start walking toward the door. I needed to at least check it closer for signs of being new or changed, and I needed to test the knob. Joey looked up as soon as I walked back in the office. Did you see what I meant about the door? I locked the knob, glanced out the window, and then turned back to him. Yeah, it was like you said. I don't understand it, but it's on the left side of the wall now. He looked relieved and scared at the same time. See? Jesus, I've been scared I was going crazy, but I knew what I saw. You didn't go near it, did you? Shuddering slightly, I walked over and sat down, not quite daring to meet his eyes. Yeah, I did. I wanted to get a closer look, see if I could see how someone moved it without us knowing. But it's the same door, I think. It even has dust up on top of the door frame that looks ancient. I don't... But that doesn't matter. I tried the knob. It was unlocked. Joey sucked in a breath. Did you open it? Looking away, I stared out the window and gave a shrug. I tried, but... Well, I couldn't get it open. Was it blocked from the other side or something? He asked. Glancing back at him, I just shook my head. I couldn't see what was on the other side. And after that, I left and I came up here. I sat tense, waiting for his next question. When one didn't come, I looked over at him. He was staring bleakly at the TV, his face lined with worry. Looking at him, I felt a pang of sympathy. He needed this job even more than I did, and freaking him out worse wasn't going to help anything. And, maybe I was wrong. It wasn't impossible that my imagination had run wild down in the dark, especially after seeing the door moved to the left side. It's weird for sure, I said. But let's just see what happens, okay? Maybe they changed the wall while we weren't here. Maybe when you saw it the first time last night, you didn't notice the change because you're so used to how it was. Then when you go back, it seems like it changed from 1 minute to the next. I leaned forward. Isn't that possible? Looking over at me, he seemed skeptical as he nodded. Yeah, I guess it could be that. He paused before adding, and nothing has happened to us, right? And it's their business what they do back there, or if they change stuff around. So long as we get paid and don't have any problems. I nodded. Yep. Looking past him to the TV, I asked him what he was watching. That led to us watching part of an old action movie and talking about what some of our favorites were. By the end of the night, things seemed more normal, at least on the surface. Inside, my stomach continued to churn. A half-dozen times, I almost told him the rest of what had happened in the basement, every time telling myself it'd been my imagination. Or even if it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't our business what went on behind that door, after all. Instead, I kept quiet, and when our shift ended and we went back out to our cars, I waved to him like nothing was wrong. It wasn't until I was driving away that I said it out loud, like I was talking to my friend and partner, Joey. So yeah, I couldn't get the door open. Not because it wouldn't open. The knob turned just fine, and when I pulled on the door, it seemed to be swinging easily at first. But then the knob was ripped out of my hand. Looking into the rearview mirror, I could see a mix of fear and shame in my eyes. Joey, there's someone on the other side of that door, and when I tried to open it, they slammed it back shut. The next night, I offered to go down with Joey to check the door. I still hadn't told him about the door slamming back shut, and I'd have convinced myself that I'd either imagined it Or it must have just been on a spring or hydraulic that made it quick to shut back. I hadn't tried it again, had I? No, I'd just run back upstairs and lock the door like a little kid. But I still had enough guilt and uncertainty that I knew I needed to make the offer. Joey seemed to consider it, and then shook his head. Giving me a dry laugh, he said it'd be fine, and he'd hit me up on the radio if he saw anything funky down there. Anything more than the magic door, he added with a slight grin. That was about 9:45, and by 10:15 or so, I could see him moving between the stacks of pallets, crates, and shelves that filled portions of the main floor. I could feel myself tensing as he turned toward the steps that led downstairs and out of view. The minutes started to crawl by. I expected him back by 10:30 or 10:40 at the latest, but by 11 o'clock, there was still no sign of him. I started trying to get Joey on the radio, but there wasn't a response. That wasn't that weird by itself. Actually, some of the walls in that place were surprisingly dense, especially the basement levels. You could transmit in one spot and get nothing 5 feet over. I looked at the clock again. 11:10. Okay, I needed to go down and check on him, and done and done. I let out a scream as I turned to see Joey standing in the doorway. Shit, man. You almost gave me a heart attack. You okay? He looked fine, other than a bandage wrapped on his left arm, and noticing me looking at it, he held it up with a smiling nod. Yeah, I'm fine. Scraped it on something down there. Don't even know what. Just noticed it was bleeding a little, so I wrapped it up. He paused and then added, That's what took so long. I studied him a moment, and then nodded. Okay, well, I was getting worried. Was about to come look for you in a minute. Swallowing, I went on. How was the door? Still on the wrong side? Joey raised his eyebrows and let out a slow breath. Yeah, it is. It's weird, isn't it? But it's not causing any problems, so I say live and let live. He pointed to the TV. What's on that's good? Feeling some relief, I glanced at the TV. Looks like it's one of those superhero movies. If you want to watch something else, I can. He came and sat down, picking up his coffee and taking a small sip and then a longer pull from the cup. Damn, this is good. Glancing back up at me and then the TV, he shook his head. No, that's fine. Looks interesting. For the next 2 hours, we sat watching the movie in companionable silence, and when it was over, I glanced over at Joey, half expecting him to be asleep. To my surprise, he was still wide awake and smiling. That was pretty good. Yeah, I used to love comic books and stuff when I was a kid. I raised an eyebrow. Really? I didn't think you liked this kind of movie that much. Frowning slightly, he gave a shrug. I mean, I don't think you can beat the classics, right? Stuff like Sonic, man. Hell, I was in my 20s back then, but Nick Cage was badass in the first couple of those. I just stared at him, trying to see if he was joking. Dude, what are you talking about? Joey looked slightly confused. You know, Sonic, man. He was a soldier that got trapped in an experiment where they were testing POWs. The rest of them got obliterated, and at first he was too. But then he came back. He was like a ghost made of the screams of his dead buddies. In the 70s, he was mainly getting revenge on like evil military villains, but then in the 80s, they did a rework on him. He was in a gang, but he tried to stop the other gang members from hurting this store full of innocent people or something. He got killed with the rest of them, but he came back, powered by their dying screams. Same kind of deal, except he couldn't fly no more, and he could scream and tear people apart. It was pretty gnarly, man. He looked at me before going on, his eyes still fixed on me. And then, you know, they made those Nick Cage movies. The first 2 were awesome, violent and badass, and really like the comics, right? But then they made the third one PP-14, and it was pretty lame. I mean, I still watched it, but they don't have those old movies here, do they? Heart pounding, I started to stand up. What are you... Joey's hand went around my throat, choking off my words as he finished standing and started dragging me to the door. He'd always been bigger than me, but how was he this fast and strong? I clawed at his arm and chest, but he seemed to barely notice, chuckling to himself as he pulled me out of the office and across the warehouse floor. Dumb of me, right? I mean, it wasn't gonna last forever, but I was enjoying hanging out for a bit. And to be fair, how the hell do you not have a Sonic Man here? Between blind panic and lack of air, it was hard for me to focus on what he was saying or anything else, but I did notice he was taking us toward the basement stairs. An image of the wrong door down there flashed into my mind, and I started fighting harder. For a moment, his grip slipped, and I managed to wriggle free and fall to the floor. He was on me the next second, but not before I got my feet up and kicked him as hard as I could in the face. His head snapped back, followed by his body, as he fell backwards and down the concrete stairwell that led into the dark below. Oh shit. What if Joey was just crazy or something and needed help? Did I just kill him? I started looking around for something to use as a weapon or a light. There weren't any lights on the stairs, and I wasn't going all the way down to the first level basement to hit the switch there, but I needed to see if he was okay or coming for me again before I turned my back on the stairwell. Glancing around, my eyes landed on a large cardboard box at the end of a nearby row. I knew that box. It'd been there for over 2 years, and unless I was wrong, the manifest said it was full of emergency road flares. Keeping my eye on the shadows surrounding the way down, I went over and ripped the box open. Inside were smaller boxes, each containing a roadside kit with 2 reflective pop-up triangles and 3 road flares. Dumping out one of the kits, I grabbed up the 3 flares. Taking the cap off the first, I pulled free the yellow tag that was supposed to light it. It worked, and the bright red flare made me wince and turn away, my eyes watering. All the shadows shuddered and danced in the shifting light, and it took me a second before I realized part of the motion I was seeing was Joey coming back up the stairs. That was a good hit, kid. Doesn't change anything, but it was a good try. His face looked slick and misshapen now, though I couldn't say for sure in the red gaze if it was covered in blood or something else. Bad news is, now I'm just gonna break your legs and arms before I carry you down. Screw this. He was crazy, and something was moving on his face, coming out of his face. Long, dark worms were sliding out of a half-dozen places in his face. Open wounds. His left nostril pushing past the weeping, deflated eye in his right socket. He didn't seem to notice at first, and when I started to scream, he just laughed louder. Come on down with me, kid. It'll be okay. I want to show you something down beyond that door. You have to see it. It is really something. He'd used my shock and horror to close the distance between us, but he was still a good 15 feet away when he sprang for me. His weight brought me down easily, and he was immediately on top, feet bearing down on my arms as he tried to use his leverage and terrible strength to snap them above the elbow. No, please, don't. My left arm gave way, pain flaring through me so sharply, my vision started to go black. The agony was fighting with my terror now, and for a moment it was close to winning. If I passed out, it was over. He'd break me up and carry me down to whatever waited down there. Just then, I heard something below us, faint but clear even through the floor. The sharply cold chiming of a bell. Something about that sound scared me more than anything else had, and in my fear, I found the strength to rip my right arm from under Joey's boot. Acting more out of instinct than anything else, I jammed the flare into his side, digging it in as he began to scream and try to get away from me. The wind had been knocked out of me when he landed on me, and between that and the pain, I could barely breathe. Still, I didn't have time to rest or recover, and if I tried to run, he'd just catch me again. Rolling on my left side, I struggled to my feet. One of the other flares had come loose in the fight, but the last one was still sticking out of my pocket. Thankfully, the right pocket. Grabbing it out, I put the cap in my mouth and twisted it free roughly before spitting it out. I was keeping my eyes on Joey the entire time. The first flare had fallen when he jumped away, but his side was still smoking more than I'd have expected, and as I watched, he went from being doubled over to collapsing on the ground. I felt an illogical pang of worry and sympathy for him again, and forced myself to kill it. This wasn't Joey. I saw the red worms starting to crawl out from him a little, their heads raised as if testing the air. Whatever this was, it had to die. Knowing it was a risk, I ran back to the office. We hadn't had a power outage in a couple of years, but last time Joey had brought in a pair of big kerosene lanterns for us to use, and as far as I knew, they were still in a cabinet somewhere. I found them quick enough, though I realized halfway through trying to get him down that I couldn't reach the one farther back with my one good arm. Screw it. One would have to do. Joey was back up on his hands and knees when I got back out to him. His face was still writhing in spots, but it did seem closer to normal, and the spot on his side had finally stopped smoking. Sitting the lantern down, I unscrewed the fuel cap and picked it back up, slinging the contents of the lamp onto Joey while trying to keep as much distance as I could. "Stop, man. I'm messed up, but I need help. I think I went crazy for a minute." "You're not Joey," I said. He looked up at me as he tried to get back to his feet and failed. "What are you talking about? Course I am. Just call somebody. I think I'm hurt bad." I finished slinging the lamp fuel on him, and I threw the lamp aside. Pulling the uncapped flare back out of my pocket, I bit down on the yellow tag and yanked it off, moving away from the sudden heat and light as quick as I could. But not before I felt some of my hair start to burn and crisp on the right. I shook my head. It didn't matter. I just needed to get this done and get out of here. The Joey thing was laughing at me now. "That's fine. Go ahead. Doesn't make any difference. You think I'm the first or the only? You think that's the only door? Our time is coming, kid." His words turned into a ghastly, screeching wail as I jammed the flare into his face. He made a final lunge for me, but this time I stepped back in time, and he fell to the concrete, his entire body already engulfed in orange and then blue flame. I grabbed up the third flare and waited in case he got up again, but by the time it stopped burning, there wasn't much left. I almost threw the last flare back down then. I was desperate to get out of there, away from it, away from whatever was beneath us. There was no way I was going down there to try to stop it or destroy that door, but maybe I could at least do something to slow it down. I went back to the office and got a chair, pulled down the other lantern. I also found the gas cans we kept for the forklift, the rare times we needed it. Even with a broken arm, my fear helped me work fast, and in 10 minutes, I had several spots soaked and ready to burn. I left the flare burning on the last spot and went out to my car. I almost went to the local hospital or the police, but Jessica's resolve has always been a strange town, and I don't trust that this all happened without anyone knowing about it. Either way, something in me whispered that I needed to get away while I could get away, and maybe it won't be worth anyone's trouble to hunt me down. No need to make it easy for them, after all. I'll have to make ATM withdrawals for the next few days, but I'll try to make it unpredictable and then head in a different direction when I'm done. After that, I'm going far away and laying low for a while, taking cash jobs and watching my back, all the time looking out for something out of place or wrong. Because that's what I've learned. I need to listen to the small voice. Remember, the world is a much stranger and hungrier place than most people realize, and wishing that it wasn't doesn't make it so. So if I see something else wrong or that doesn't belong, I'm not doubting it, and I'm not walking away next time. I'm gonna run.